Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. Now, look, the last episode I left off, Mitch, he figured out that she's actually on some porn site. And it makes him a little nervous and uncomfortable because now he has confirmation. He needs to tell his PO what's going on so he can get out from under his thumb. But at the same time, he doesn't want any blowback because he's crossed the line. And he could actually go back to prison for this. You know what I'm saying? So he's trying to figure out a way to approach the situation in a way that's going to make sure that he's straight and that he's protected. Okay? Now, when he comes out of the hotel room, before he comes out of the hotel room, he has to pack up all of his stuff and he has to make sure that, he has the information that he needs. So now he has to make sure that he gets those bugs and those wires out of, and the cameras out of that hotel room that's directly across from him, the one that she was in. He has to get that stuff up out of there, right? Because you can trace that stuff back sometime. The police can. They can figure out who bought it, where it came from, so on and so forth. So, he wants to make sure that he gets that up out of there. So when he comes out of the room, she's on her way out of the room. So he goes downstairs and he's in the elevator with her. And they're riding downstairs and she's got her briefcase and he's got his. And he looks at her and he couldn't help himself. He said, "You look familiar." And she looks at him when grins at him. She said, "I don't think I know you." And she was like, what do you know me from?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "You look familiar." He's flirting with her now. And she said, "Well, when you figure it out, let me know." And then he said, "How would I let you know?" And she says to him, "You'll know. You'll know." So he understood exactly what that meant. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, they both go downstairs on the elevator and she gets off the elevator and exits the building. And then he goes to the desk and he says, "Look, I need a couple more hours." And he's gave the clerk some money to rent the room. He said, "Could I have this room here?" And she said, "Sure." He lays the money down. She takes it, gives him the key. He goes upstairs and he cleans it out. He gets all of the stuff that could incriminate him, the wires, the camera. He gets all of that stuff up out of there. And then he just sits around and watches TV and chills for a little bit. And while he's watching TV, he's thinking, let me watch this video. So he looks at the video of his PO's wife and all of the things that she was doing, and it fascinates him to no ends, right? But anyway, he knows that he has to get up out of here. He didn't rent the place for a couple hours, so he wraps everything up and he leaves. And he's thinking about her the whole ride home. And what is he going to tell his PO? So when he gets home, he doesn't have any time to really lay down and sleep. So he takes and he makes a few pictures that he felt would be satisfactory for his PO. He didn't give him anything that was too explicit or anything like that. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to keep that for himself. So he gives him a stack of pictures. He goes see his PO. He gives him a stack of pictures and he tells him, "Look, are we done? Are we done?" And the PO says, "Yeah, we're done. Everything's fine. You know what I'm saying? I appreciate you doing this for me. We'll keep this on the low." So now everything seems to be okay. Everything seems to be perfectly the way it was intended to end. He's out from under his PO's thumb. He has the trust of his PO and all of these types of things. And except that now he's curious about the PO's wife because even though he's found these things out, he doesn't know what his PO is going to do with this information. He's hoping that he doesn't say anything about it. And he's fascinated with the PO's wife. So when he goes home, he gets on his phone and he sends in another request. He sends in another request asking to be a member of her site so he can watch her like everybody else. And she asked him again, "What is your referral? Who is your referral?" And he takes a bold leap. He takes a bold leap and he says, "I recognize you. Do I know you from anywhere?" And she suddenly smiles. She's on her phone and she's looking and she smiles. And she says, "Have I met you before?" She texts him back. And he said, "Yes, we've met once." And she said, "Where?" He said, "We were on a ride together." And she said, "Was the ride going up or down?" And he said it was going down. So she didn't respond back. Then she hit the button, accept, and accepted him as a member to her porn site. Now he's all excited. But the membership required him to put in a credit card. So he put in his credit card information and all this and that, right? And he could cancel it anytime, all of that kind of stuff, blah, 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 right? But he had crossed the line. He had crossed the line. He wanted out from under the thumb of his PO. He wanted out from under his thumb. But he had put himself in a worse situation by joining his PO's wife's porn site. And the situation that it created for him was one that could put him back in prison. But he wanted to make sure that he was protected. So he developed a lot of those pictures and put them up. Now keep in mind, his wife, the PO's wife, has no idea that this dude is a parolee under the supervision of her husband. She has no idea that this is happening. She has no idea that he has pictures of her. She has no idea that he was a private investigator. None of this stuff. She has no idea. She just thinks he's a fan. She just thinks he's a fan, somebody that she can get paid from, right? Now, she's back home, and her husband, he confronts her. He doesn't show her the pictures, but he confronts her. He said, I heard something interesting today. And she asked him, what is that? And he says to her, I heard you're making money on a porn site. So she looks at him, eyes wide. Now keep in mind, these people are solidly middle class people. And she has a thriving career. You know what I'm saying? She has a small shop where she sells these like custom made trinkets, kind of like what Etsy does. You know what I'm saying? But this was back in the day. Well respected. People liked her. You know what I'm saying? All of that old kind of stuff, right? And like I said, beautiful woman. They had no kids, though. They had no kids. But she wanted to make more money because her business wasn't thriving the way that her husband thought it would. You know what I mean? So she was doing this to supplement her income so they could continue to live the lifestyle that they were living. But her husband, when she tried to explain all of this to him, he couldn't handle that. He couldn't handle the idea of the fact that other men could see his wife performing sexual acts, even though it was not with another person. He could not deal with that. So he asked her to stop. In fact, he insisted, demanded that she stop. And she told him she would if they had the money. And she showed him how much money she was making and all of this and that, right? And just showing him the paperwork on the money that's going into their account, you know? And he's looking at it. And guess what he sees? You know, because like I told you, the PO had to put his, the parole officer, the parolee had to put his credit card information in to be finalized as far as a member of her site, right? So his name flashed across the thing. It's on the paperwork. Now that's for her eyes only in the credit card company, but now she shows this paperwork to her husband, trying to convince him of the money that she's making off of these people, and these people mean absolutely nothing to her. And he sees his parolee's name and the date, which is today, the same day that they finalize everything and they walk away from the thing, and all of a sudden he sees his parolee's name signing up for membership to watch his wife. So he calls the next day. Him and his wife continue to talk, and they argue and mad, but they decided not to go to bed angry and whatnot. And they kissed and made up, and they decided that they would talk about it the next day. But the next day, he gets up early, he goes into the office, and he calls his parolee. And he tells Mitch that he needs to see him in the office. Now, Mitch comes down to the office, and he thinks that he may be in trouble because the tone of his parole officer's voice was different. So when he gets down there, Mitch is in the office and he's talking to the PO, and the PO tells him, he said, look, thank you for doing what you did for me, blah, 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 this and that, and I thought I could trust you. Mitch says, you can't trust me. Then he said, well, why is your name on my wife's membership list? So Mitch leans back in the chair and he tells him, he said, man, I'm not going to look at that. He said, I just did that, you know what I'm saying, to make sure that, you know, what it was that I thought the information that I can give you, I just did that to make sure it was. He said, no. He said, you joined her site after. He said, it shows the date and time and everything. See, Mitch didn't know that. He didn't anticipate that. So now he says, you got me. He said, man, I just wanted to see. And he said, I can't have you looking at my wife. So Mitch hits him back. Everybody else is. So now the PO is getting upset. So Mitch, even though he's not a hardened criminal, so to speak, like I say, he was a private investigator that crossed the line and ended up in prison. He ain't done no real dirt. You understand what I'm saying? Not no gritty street dirt. But he learned a little things in prison, and he had learned when somebody pushes, you push back, and you push back harder. Push back harder. So he told his PO, he said, look, if anything happens to me, if you violate me, you try to send me back, I got pictures. I'm going to turn it all over to the police. I'm going to turn it all over to the judge. I'm going to get you fired. I'm going to take it all to your supervisor. He said, you can't touch me. He said, you can't touch me. I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's that on that. Now, the PO is messed up about that because he just realized that as a parole officer, the parolee can never believe that they control you and you don't control them. But he had just been given a quick lesson in how to lose control. And he didn't know what to do about it. And he was trying to figure out what to do. So he told Mitch, he said, get out of my office. So Mitch gets up and said, don't forget what I said, man. He said, I'm going to continue to report. I'm going to continue to pay my fees. But leave me alone, man, and everything will be fine. But then Mitch did say, I'm not even going to watch your wife. But that was a lie. That was a lie. As soon as he left, he logged into his wife's site. Now, keep in mind, when she's not doing live shows on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, you can watch all of her recordings, you know? And that's what he did. When he got downstairs in his car, he's driving away, he pulls it up, and he's watching all of these recordings. Now, he had similar stuff himself from what he had gotten off of her when he was surveilling her. But he was just watching her. And he wanted to see all of the things that she did. And the more he watched, the more he became fascinated with her. And he started going down that rabbit hole, and he started to imagine, what if? What if? Now, see, here's the thing. He had started to disrespect his parole office to the extent that, you know, I'm going to do what I want to do. He saw his parole officer as somebody that was less than deserving of being treated with respect. And let me touch on why this episode is important, because I know a lot of you probably thinking, well, why talk about this, Joe? What is it about this particular incident that you want us to know that will help deter people from the criminal lifestyle? Well, let me tell you. Whether you come to prison for a minor crime or a major crime, right? There's something about this environment that will take hold of you if you let it. And most people, it does happen. It's something about this environment that'll take hold of you, and it will corrupt you. And it will make you see people in the way that that you perceive anyway, that people see you as less than somebody that's deserving of respect and to be treated decently. And that's what Mitch had done. He had taken on those ways of that environment that he was in for those 2-3 short years, right? He had taken on those ways while he was in prison to survive. But when he got out, he took it with him. It's not so easy to shake off the corrupt nature of being in an environment where nobody cares about anybody, where there's just nothing but hopelessness. It's hard to shake that off. So when he got on the streets and he got caught up in this, even though the parole officer had asked him to do this for him, really forced him to do that, made him feel like if he didn't do it, that he was going to be hard on him, right? Even though the parole officer crossed the line, Mitch went further He saw this as a game that you experience in prison. You push me, I push back harder. So now he sees the parole officer as somebody that he's going to break. He's going to dominate. And now he's treating him like he does not deserve the respect that Mitch himself wants. Because he's crossed the line and society has deemed him as somebody that's unworthy, and he's bought into that. And that is what I want to make sure that people understand. When you get put in a place like this, when you get put in prison, okay, you lose a lot of who you are just trying to survive the environment. And then you start to project what you've lost onto other people and through your actions. And that is what Mitch is doing to his PO. So now he's watching this man's wife. He's watching this man's wife, and he's going to go a step further. He's going to go a step further. When he goes on the site on the Tuesday when she's live, he makes all these different requests, and he says this and that, and he says certain things to let her know that I'm the guy from the elevator. You feel what I'm saying? And all of this type of stuff, right? So he says a few other things, and she clicks him up to where she could see him, he could see her. It's not just messages coming across the board. This is them. Now, the other people that are listening and watching her can't see him, right? But they can see her and hear him. You see what I'm saying? That's an exclusive feature on this particular site where people that are watching can hear you if you are one of the members, but they can't see you. But you pay for that. You pay exclusive money for that. So now her and Mitch are going back and forth with these requests. And it becomes somewhat of a game for Mitch. And he starts to become infatuated, even obsessed with his PO's wife. And she sees this as strictly business. She's not interested in Mitch at all. But in Mitch's mind, she is. Because she's calling him baby, she's calling him daddy. And truth be told, if we're going to be completely honest, he's seeing her body and he's seeing her get wet. In his mind, she's responding physically to his request. In his mind, she's responding physically to him. Why would she put me on the screen so she could see me? Why would she do that if she didn't want to be with me? He's convincing himself of all of these different things. And now he's caught all the way up. He's caught all the way up. And now his parole officer is caught up too. What is he doing? He's talking to his wife when she comes home, and she's, they're open about it now. And she's telling him about this dude, and he says, who is this dude? And he tells him, that's my parolee. And then he admits to paying him to follow her and all this and that. And she gets upset about it, but she understands and she forgives him because he forgave her. But it's like, now what are we going to do? This man is somebody that she's afraid of now, because now that she knows the whole story, she sees that he's crossed a line. This is not about being a fan. This is about being a crazed fan. So now she's like, I'm finna discontinue. He's like, yeah, do that. So she hit the button, took him off as a member. So he's blacked out. Now he gets that notice and says that his membership has been ended. And that's the end of it. So now he's tripping. So the next time he goes down to see his parole officer, when he gets down to the parole officer, he said, what are you doing? You tell your wife to reactivate my membership. And the parole officer says, I'm not going to do that. He said, that's done. He said, this is going to be completely professional. You're a parolee. I'm your parole officer. That's the end of that. You finish your time on paper, and you go on with your life. So the parolee said, that's not how it's going to be. If your wife don't reactivate my membership, I'm going to send all of these pictures and this paperwork to your boss man, your supervisor. Now, the parole officer, he's terrified because he's got over 20 years in. He can't afford to lose his pension. None of that. But he doesn't know what else to do because he's dealing with somebody that has gone beyond. And that's what will happen to you when you come to prison. You'll start to develop these coping mechanisms in here, and you'll become a monster, and you'll take somebody, even though he mistreated Mitch, Mitch has turned into a monster, and now he's out of control. This is not what you want, people. This is not what you want. Not even for the small things that you would go through. You understand what I'm saying? But look here. Y'all stick around for the next episode, and I'm going to let you know how this turns out, right? This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.